Welcome back, everybody. If you remember last week, we were working on building this assignment here for Unit 2, which I call HTML Basics. And we had been working on the slideshow from the publisher. And, just so you can get a little underpinning here, it's from this book. And we managed to get up through, I think it was slide 25 or thereabouts. So we kind of finished up with a description list. I always call it definition list, but whatever, description list. And we hit this checkpoint, and then I'm like, you know what, that's enough for tonight. So we're going to pick up right here and finish this off. And then I will show you how to complete the actual assignment. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to do case studies to wrap up both Unit 2 and Chapter 2. And then we'll move forward to Chapter 3. All right. So we're using Visual Studio Code, or at least that's what I've been using here in class to code. And I am back into exactly where I left off. I haven't used this product for any other coding so far this week. So when I launched it, it came right back to where I was. If maybe your stuff is closed down, I don't anticipate that would be the case, but Visual Studio Code has this side toolbar here. You see I'm clicking on it, and this first icon is what they call the File Explorer, where you can navigate to the folder where your work is located, so you can see the files here as you're working. And I think that is pretty helpful. You will notice that sometimes I collapse that down just because I want more space for the code. But for right now, it's not really an issue, so I'm leaving it like this. You can see that, just as a really quick review, some of the things that we learned last time is, and this is a really important one, the default name for any home page on the internet in terms of a file name is always index.html, and all lowercase, no variations, and it's just a rule, right? Why? Because if you name your file that way for your home page, you do not need to actually type out the file in the URL. And my example was, like, if you go to whateverwebsite.com, you're not typing in whateverwebsite.com/index.html. It just loads automatically. If I don't name it correctly, like for example, if I put a capital I in the file name, it will not load automatically. It's kind of weird, right? But that is how it works out on the web. Other takeaways here. We also learned about the doc type. So this goes at the top of every HTML document. The basic purpose of it is to indicate to the browser which rules we're following. This tells it we're following HTML5 rules. And then the browser says, oh, HTML5, I can do that. I'll follow those rules, assuming you wrote your code correct. The other thing we learned is that all HTML documents, once you get past the doc type, have a opening HTML tag and a closing one at the bottom, and everything goes in between those two tags. And then the document is split into two major sections. The head section, and I always think of that as the non-visible part of the page. The head section includes a title. That title propagates the tab in your browser. Those are the words that go into the tab. And then the meta tag, which declares the character set that we're using. By default, it's UTF-8, but they consider it good practice to include it here. And the UTF-8 character set holds most of the world's major languages within it. Most of the European languages, and Arabic and Hebrew, and I think some of the Chinese characters too. So it's pretty much all there. Rarely does that change, but it's considered good practice to put that in. The visible part of the page sits inside the body tags, right? And then, so this is the part really that we put into the window of the browser. This can be text, it can be images, it can be videos, it can be whatever the content is. So the body section holds the visible part of the page. And then we learned about a number of different tags. So we started out with heading tags. So we did 3 levels. There's 6, but I kind of think 4, 5, and 6 are pretty frankly useless. You can experiment with them if you want, but I require for the assignment that you at least do 3 levels, right? do it H1, H2, H3. You can put them wherever you want on the page. But for me, it made sense to have a title, kind of a subtitle, and then like a tagline. It's kind of how I'm looking at it. Then we learned also about paragraphs, right? And paragraphs are one of those basic structures. And I also taught you about how to do word wrap. So if you guys notice, I'm noticing my code goes off the side of the screen, like right, like way over. And under the view menu in Visual Studio Code, there's a word wrap at the bottom. Notice the shortcut key Alt-Z will trigger it if you don't want to go to the menus. But that way, if something does go off the edge of the screen, I can hit that button and it narrows it up so I can see it all at once. Right. Just because it looks like it's multiple lines of code, this technically is all on line 12. Right. Remember all that? So this is an example of a paragraph. Then inside that paragraph, we experimented with bold tags, italics, and then we also looked at strong, which is the alternate version of the bold tag, the M tag, which is the alternate version of italics. So bold is basically the same as strong, and italic is basically the strong as M. Semantically, they have different meanings, but functionally, they both have the same effect. Then we learned how to do line breaks, where we can move our code down to the next line. And then we also talked about how in the old XHTML format, when you did a line break, it had to include a closing tag inside of it. So that's an example of that. Not required in HTML5, by the way, but if you were coding in XHTML, and there are times when you do still do that, you would include that with a line break. Moving on, we learned about some phrase elements. So phrase elements are ones that you put in line inside of a block item. And this one, for example, highlights that text yellow. And then I did both superscripts here and subscripts there. And then I also talked about this phrase element, which I'm not really a huge fan of, which makes your item smaller. And if you guess, well, if there's a small, is there a large? Yes, there is. And there's also extra large, extra large, extra small, extra small, right? It's usually better to control that stuff with CSS, but this is kind of a little bit of a legacy hangover of old HTML. It still works just fine. And in a quick go-to pinch, it's not a bad thing to use. I'm not a big fan of it, but I'll tell you that right up front. The other thing we learned about are block quotes, and that's basically to simulate printed materials when you have direct quotations that are longer than 4 lines long, that you're supposed to indent it from both sides. So basically a block quote's like a paragraph, but it moves the content in from the margins. I don't know if it's like 10 or 20 pixels, something like that. And then from there, we went on and we learned about unordered lists, which create bullet points, right? And unordered lists have an opening and a closing, and then list items in between, each with their own opening and closing. And so this one would give you these little round bullets. If I did an ordered list, that numbers the list, right? But functionally, they pretty much work the same. One thing, and I haven't mentioned this yet, is unordered lists are actually one of those early mechanisms we used for menu building. And often there's still some people that use them for building menus on websites. I'm not a big fan of that, but it is something you encounter professionally still. Then we looked at what the book calls a description list. I call it a definition list. And I like challenge myself to go out and look that up and make sure that I'm probably incorrect, but I'm sure the book is correct. But I always call it definition list. So I apologize if you hear me say that. I mean description list. And that one's a little different than these in that you have the same kind of opening and closing, but then for each thing you're adding, you have a definition term and the definition data. And then it creates kind of this indented look when you output it, which is exactly why I put it on the screen that way. So it kind of, makes it look like that, basically. All right. So that's the basically the complete recap of where we were at last week, just to kind of put your head back in it, right? Just in case you forgot or didn't listen the first time. And I take no offense to that, but also like if somebody's like hitting this video cold on the internet, now we got a little bit of an underpinning of where we came from and where we're going to. So our goal is to finish off this chapter. And the next piece that we need to look at is this, which is talking about special characters. And this is kind of a weird thought. And I'm actually going to start with these two, right? So if I'm coding and in my code, I set up a tag by using the greater than and less than brackets. That's what those are called. Those, you know, so
Alligator mouth.
what's that?
Alligator mouth. Like
Yeah, yeah.
remember like in school.
Yeah, you know what? But right, but you know, I mean, formally, uh, greater than or less than,
Yeah.
right? Um, you know, because we think of it from the math perspective, but when we start coding, that would be a left bracket and that would be a right bracket, and we collectively call them brackets. So, what if I'm trying to type code, or what if I'm trying to put words on a web page that show a bracket? This is really kind of a weird kind of thought, right? Because if I do a bracket here, it goes, oh, it's a tag, so I'm just going to ignore it. That doesn't go on the screen. This part goes on the screen. But if I just want to put a bracket in the middle of my stuff, maybe I would say something like really weird, like, I don't know, and I'm just going to kind of make up a quick little paragraph here just to demonstrate this. What if I wanted to say 5 is less than 6, like math, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys notice it's red?
Yeah, it's
Which
not
means it's an
working.
error. Because what it's thinking is it's like, oh, you're about to do a tag, but you screwed it up and didn't finish it. So if I want to get a tag on the screen, I can't just straight up type it. I got to use what we call a special character code. And so if I want to put that symbol in, I actually have to replace it with ampersand LT semicolon,
Oh,
right? Yeah, that's kind of messed up, but that's how you do it. So I'll just show you here. So I'm going to go ampersand LT semicolon, right? And this is called a special character code. And while I'm in Visual Studio, I just want to show you that there's more than a couple of these. There's a whole giant list actually of special character codes. In the book here, we're just showing you a couple right now to get you started because those are the ones you tend to use the most. And so I'll show you the difference here. I'm going to go ahead and do a Control S to save. I am going to launch this in my browser. So I'm going to go to the trouble here of locating the page in my file system. So for me, it's on my G drive, in my class folder, in my semester. Oh, wrong spot. Sorry. It's in my Prometheus area here. And there's where it is. And we're unit 2 in the project. And there's the page. So I'm going to launch it. And now you can see here how it appears correctly. Now, I'm not saying it wouldn't show up if I did it the other way, but man, it can get really messy when you start typing the wrong code. Maybe not when you're doing basic HTML, but the moment you start doing CSS or adding JavaScript to it, it can break horribly, right? So that's why you want to do this correctly. So that's an example of one of those. Now, very much in the same fashion, you can do the other one, right? So with that one, and notice it's LT less than, GT greater than. So not too hard to remember. Another one that's really kind of weird is because ampersands are used to designate these special character codes, I therefore cannot take an ampersand and put it straight up in my text either. So if I want to do an ampersand, I have to do ampersand amp semicolon, and I may as well kind of demonstrate that too. And I'll say this is an ampersand. I think that's how you type it. And you know, normally your inclination would just be to type that, but I have to go ampersand AMP semicolon like that. And then I'm going to say wow. And then I'm going to save it. And I'm going to go back to my browser and do a quick refresh and take a look at the result. And there it is. Right. Pretty simple stuff, but I think you're seeing the value of this. Now, here's the other one that gets kind of weird. When you are, and I think we demonstrated this, when you are coding and we discovered already, like if I went into a paragraph and I went like this and put a bunch of carriage returns in, it doesn't necessarily show up on the web page. In fact, let me prove it to you. Here's the refresh, nothing changed. Remember that? Right. So like white space is ignored often, and I'm going to control Z my way out of that, by the way. And we also learned that if I go ahead and let's say I type a bunch of extra spaces here, and I save it and I go back, so that would be right here, and I refresh, well, it moved one space, but it certainly didn't move 20. And really what this is showing you is that when you type a space inside of a tag in HTML, only the first one counts. All the rest are ignored. If I did want to put extra spaces in there, let's just say I wanted to do something like this. I want to go space. I want to spread out those dots. All right, this would work. So watch, because it's only one space. But what if I'm like, you know what? Those spaces are way too close. I want them farther apart. Right? I'm just being kind of snarky about it. But you might have those kind of aesthetic things that you're trying to reach, right? And so I would come in here and intuitively I would just, because like in Microsoft Word, I would just do this and I could print it out and it would work, right? And here's the save back to the browser and a refresh, and here it doesn't work. So they developed basically what they call a non-breaking space. You see how this is blank here? So this needs to be inserted to add extra spaces beyond the first one in your documents. It's kind of weird, but that's how it works, right? So if you're trying to force in extra spaces, you use a non-breaking space. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to remove the extra ones. The first one counts, right? The second one doesn't. So then I have to go ampersand NBSP semicolon, stands for non-breaking space. I'm not sure what that means exactly or who thought of that, but there it is. And then I'm going to paste one of those in to each one of these spots. And then just to kind of make a point of it, I'll put another dot here, and then I'll paste in like a whole bunch of them, right? And put a few more dots like that. So watch the result of this when we go back to the browser now. Now those extra spaces did appear here, and I added a bunch of them here, right? So this is handy in a lot of like really weird situations when you're just trying to get stuff on the page to look just so. Generally speaking, and I'm saying this very practically, it's not always a good idea to use this to fix your pages, right? There's probably other ways that you can do it. But in a pinch, this is a good trick, right? And it works. And it works consistently. The other special character one that they show here that's pretty useful, like if you go to a website, I don't know if you guys ever noticed, but if you look on your keyboard, there's no key that prints that, right? And ultimately, this is what special characters are about, is we're trying to take what really are extended key patterns that we don't see on our keyboard and get them to show up on the screen, right? So for example, if I wanted to add a copyright to the bottom of my web page, I would use this, I would use this code here and copy semicolon. So I'm going to just do that. So I'm going to go way to the bottom here. And then I don't really have a footer section yet, but we can assume later on this will become a footer. So I'm going to make this a paragraph. And you know what? We'll use the small tag here too, just for the heck of it. And then inside here, I'm going to do ampersand copy semicolon. What's the year? Pretty sad. 2024, I think, is the correct year. Copyright 2024. And I could do something like goofy, like Takis Kinnis Incorporated, all rights reserved, etc., etc., etc. Right, so that would kind of be my footer. I'm just kind of being a little goofy here, but let's go back and take a look at this now. At the very bottom, it's going to appear way down here as I refresh, and now I got to scroll to see it. But there's my copyright. So see how I got the little thing in there. And so I could see that being useful, right? And by the way, if you're putting original content out on the internet, images, words, music, whatever, you want to claim ownership of it, because then otherwise people are like, hey, it's fair game. Yes, one.
Yeah, I got a quick question. So in coding too, I noticed like there's a website I went to before, and it doesn't allow you to actually copy what's written on there. So I can't copy it and paste it onto like a note or something. It doesn't allow you to even copy it.
Yeah, that's just a little bit of a coding trick.
Okay.
It's a kind of a sophisticated, there's a number of different ways to accomplish that. Most likely it's probably JavaScript, but it could be other technologies too. Sometimes people put words on the screen and they're an image, so you can't like select the words.
Yeah.
Right. There's, by the way, there's hacks to work around that, right? But they figure only the clever people will know. So, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? People don't want you stealing their stuff. Same is true with images. Some people go out of their way to protect their images, because as happened to me a few times, I would like spend all this time creating these beautiful images of products to sell. And then somebody else would come along, right click, save as, then they put it on their website, and good luck proving it's yours. Yeah, it's pretty dastardly, but it's totally true. Little do they realize that most images, if they're unaltered, right, and that's the key part of it, carry with them metadata that can prove that it was you that took it. Like location and time, date stamps, and even what camera you were using to take that image, if that's how it was put together. Yeah, that's a really good point, Juan. That does happen. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting is if you look, there's a table in the back of our book, and I'm not going to go to the book right now, but there are HTML list of special character codes. There you go. And I'm not sure, you know what, I'm just going to be safe and go to W3 schools, but here's some ones that we didn't look at. Like if you wanted to put a euro, like not a dollar sign, but a euro sign on your web page, this is your code, or this one, or this one. So, and I'll explain what that all means. So like, check out some of these weird special characters, right? So just look at this first column here, right? It's math symbols, Greek letters, euro, playing cards. I mean, oh my God, it actually goes like on and on and on and on. But there's like huge lists of these, by the way. So you can put some really crazy looking stuff up on the screen. And the secret sauce actually is that if you look at the UTF-8 character list, right, and I think this is probably a better one, like all the stuff that you can actually output. So I'm going to just zoom in here a little bit so you can see it, right? So some of this stuff we can just go to the keyboard and press a key and get it, right? Like all this stuff here, we can do that with. These are all this, like the top, the shift of all the numbers. Here's the numbers. Here's like some special characters, uppercase, lowercase, etc. Right? So that's all the normal keyboard stuff. But here's what gets really weird about this is if you know how to like maybe press Control Shift Alt 5 or something, you can invoke characters that you didn't even know were there that are part of this character set, like all these weird ones. But if they're in the character set, and like like if you're a Spanish speaker or a German speaker or whatever, and you want some like accents and umlauts or whatnot, I mean the stuff is there, right? But you got to know how to reach it, and it's always through those special character codes. The special character codes typically will have the approach that we learned, right, which is ampersand and some sort of word, or it also typically has a numeric code that goes with it too. And in the old days, and I'm just telling you guys, be thankful that you weren't in the old days, because in the old days we'd have to like go to like a book and look it up and then go, oh, that one's a 8704, and these days if I'm doing copyright, all I have to remember is ampersand, copy, semicolon, and I'm done, right? So you see how that's a lot easier. And I think it's pretty interesting though, that you can do that. And so really the grand point is that there's many more special character codes than what we see here. So if you wanted to like, have a web page where you had like the suit of cards, you saw that like you could do diamonds, clubs, etc. with special character codes. You just need to know the right code. That's all, right? And you can put it into your text. All right. So let's call that one complete. We played with that one enough. Now we're kind of moving away from like this like weird like standard content that we're sticking into a page, and we're going to look at what I call a generic block level container called a div. And a div is a really important HTML tag because it's kind of like all the other tags, like maybe like a paragraph is a good example, except it does not travel with any pre-built styles. It doesn't indent, it doesn't create spaces above or below. The fonts don't change, they don't become bold or italic or anything like that. It's just a container is all it is. So let me just give you a really quick example of using a div in like a super plain kind of way. So here's a div, right? And then inside here, I'm just gonna type some words. And because that's not quite enough words, I'm just gonna copy and paste them, half dozen times or so, right? Just to give me a little bit. And then I'm going to save this, and I'm just going to put this on the screen in the browser, wherever that browser went. Right here it is. And so that's going to appear down here somewhere. Here's the refresh, right? And for all you know, it's not any different than anything else. But watch what happens when I take that div and I copy it and paste it in again a couple of times, right? Here's the save. And watch the difference between this and a paragraph as I refresh. Notice that this doesn't give me any spaces in between. It doesn't indent me from the margins, where a paragraph, if I'm going from one paragraph to another, this is the end of a paragraph, this is a separate paragraph, then we go to a block quote. You notice how the paragraphs always have a little space above and a little space below?
Yeah.
And a block quote is indented. A div doesn't do any of that. It just holds the content. It doesn't really indicate what it is and gives it no styles. Now that can be seen as like, all right, why would I want to use that? Ultimately, these containers are probably some of the most flexible containers inside of HTML because that gives me complete control over the contents. There's no spacing around it. There's no stylistic aspects of the font. And they're used in a lot of different ways. So I'll give you an example. Like if I was like doing these divs, and I'm not going to keep all of these here. And I'm going to do this too. This is a div. And I go BTW, by the way. Just so when I'm looking at it in the browser, I know what I'm looking at. But what people would do with divs in the old days is they would like take those divs and they would add what we call an attribute to it. So inside the opening tag, they'd add a space, and then they would either add the keyword ID or class, either one. And I'm going to say most typically it would be ID. And then you put in an equal sign, and then you give it a name like, I don't know, junk, for example. And now it's got a name to it. And then when I go start to do my CSS, I apply a style to junk and make it look a certain way. And more importantly, and see, junk's really a bad word. Maybe the better naming for it is sample div, right? Because it's a sample div. It's telling you what's inside, right? And so what designers would do in the past, and that takes us back to this slide here, is when we would often build a website, we would start with this kind of general layout. And this layout that we see on the screen right now is really, really common on websites. So like usually you have like a header area at the top. Maybe you have like a menu bar, like, home, about, contacts, whatever, you want to put on there. And then in the middle of the page, you have like the content. And then at the bottom, you have a footer. And then, whatever the content is, I might create a div. And if this was like an article or whatever it was, a caption, I would put in a div, and then I would give it an ID or class, and I would say caption or article or something like that. I would name it. We would take it even further. We would create entire websites where it's like, okay, well, all the stuff up here is the header. So I'm going to create a div, put all the header stuff inside of it, and then I'm going to call it div ID header. And then, all right, well, I'm going to have a navigation area too. So I'm going to call it div ID nav and div ID footer, et cetera, et cetera. So much so that when they rewrote HTML4 and XHTML to create 5, they were like, you know what? Everybody does this thing where they go div ID header. Why don't we just create a header tag instead? Right. And really what it's about is structuring your page, giving your page a framework to stick stuff into. You know, so if this is like the most common layout for a web page, then why can't we create the tags that go with it? And this all leads to what we call the semantic web. But let me give you an example, right? So instead of having a div with an ID of header, we just have a header tag. So what do you put in the header tag? Well, I don't know, the heading. You know, maybe you put your logo up there and maybe a cool little banner or something, right? Maybe your phone number and address go up there. I really don't know. It depends on what your website is. And then right below it, you've got your navigation. Okay, well, that's pretty easy. You just put all your page links there. And then from there, you have the main element. Well, that's where all the stuff goes, right? And then you have the footer, which might be like a copyright or contact us or some links or Facebook or something like that. But think about that when you're working with this sort of a layout. For most websites, the header, the navigation, and the footer don't really change on most websites, right? It's the stuff in the middle that changes. And then even the stuff in the middle, it's really wise to put it in separate containers and label it so that you know what it is. And then when you're looking to style it, you know, it's easier to do. It's kind of like the same mentality of like when you know, create a document for homework and you save it, it's probably wise to say like homework week 1. And, you know, so you like later when you look at it, it's like, what's this untitled document? I don't know. You have to open it to see. It's better to put a name on it from the get-go. A couple other takeaways here, which are really important. Like what we see here, this rough visual representation of a web page, this is called a wireframe. It doesn't show what the content is, doesn't show the images or the words. This just shows the basic structure, kind of like the framework of a house. You know, or if you were looking at a blueprint of a house, like, you know, master bedroom, kitchen, family room, garage, you know, whatever, you know, and then the stuff that belongs in those spaces goes in those spaces. I don't really have to show you my bed to know it's a bedroom, you know, and that's kind of what a wireframe is for a website. All right, so once again, we have these structural elements, and then what we'll start to do is take those structural elements and kind of use them to drive content and start building something that really starts looking more like a real website. So for example, as I look at this like sample little image here, and if I can get my annotation tool handy, I can safely say that this part, that's the header. This is the nav, right? This is probably the main content area, and this is the footer. So you kind of see like the breakdown. And Juan, I see your wheels are turning there. What's your thought here?
No, this is just interesting. So this is kind of like building it from the ground up versus like going on, because you know, if you sign up like on a WordPress or Weebly, you kind of have all that laid out already and you just put in that information.
Precisely.
So this is actually building it from the ground up without using, you know, but you still need a server like a Weebly or WordPress to have that actual domain for the
Yeah,
website.
no, you're absolutely correct. But you know, like even those websites follow these formats, but they kind of corral you a little bit with like their pre-designed templates.
Yeah, yeah.
The beauty of coding static HTML is there's really no rule. There's kind of conventions as to what people normally do, but with regular straight up HTML, you can create stuff that doesn't fit that pattern at all if you wish,
Yeah.
right? You know, why did so here's kind of an interesting thought. Why do web pages lay the way they do? Well, I'll tell you why. Here I'll give you kind of like this, and I'll do this later in the semester too, by the way. But when you look at what we do on the web borrows very heavily from what happens in the print world. And I always use this website as an example. This is the Boston Globe newspaper. And what I like, you know, in showing this website is they make a really strong effort to make their website look a lot like their printed newspaper. And I want you to think about this as next time you pick up a newspaper, even like a budget one or whatever, that notice they kind of have a header. Yeah. And then they have, I guess it's a nav, or is this the nav? I'm not really sure. And then they have content. And then probably at the bottom here somewhere, if I can reach it, right? A lot of websites don't let you reach the bottom. They have some sort of a footer. Notice the copyright, you know, right? But I'm guessing this part here is the footer, and then everything above is content, right? And then also look at how they're laying out the page. And we're going to do a whole thing on page layout and what works well and what doesn't. But this is an example of a beautiful website that's highly functional, whose intent it is to follow the printed page. Because let's think about this, folks. People were printing on paper for a long time before they were printing to the screen. And so we already have a model of what works. Why do they lay it out this way? Because the human eye likes to read it this way. That's the why, right? And when you go to a website, you have an innate thought that, okay, well, if I'm looking for something, well, the header's probably at the top. The navigation should be up there somewhere too. The content's probably in the middle, and they might have some other links at the bottom, but you know, who cares about those copyrights and stuff, you know? But that's the general layout. Your brain and your eyes and your hands all automatically kind of follow that format. So what we're going to do is we're going to start switching ourselves into this format. I'm going to take the content that we've already created and put our website in these tags. And I'm trying to look, okay, so we won't hit those quite yet. So let's go back to our document now and let's make a quick determination. If we can use these tags to structure our document, what should fit inside those sections? All right, so let's do that. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to go right up to the top, and I'm going to say right now, right, so this is my goofy tagline. These are all my headers, like header tags. I'm going to do this. I'm going to click in here and I'm just going to type header. It's going to auto close. I'm going to grab the closing part. I'm going to cut it. And then I'm going to go after this H3 and paste it in. And notice it wants to go back to the margin here. Oh, I should show you this trick. When you highlight a few lines of code and hit the tab key, it indents them all at the same time, by the way. So I'm calling this my header right now. So I'm grouping them in the header tag. The next section that usually follows is the navigation. Now, I haven't built any navigation yet, but I'm going to just do this really quick. Navigation menu goes here, coming soon, right? We're going to fix this. You know, we're going to add links here, but that's where our navigation is.
That's interesting.
Right? And in fact, if it helps you, you could do it like this. Oops, you could do it like this. So you can see the structure of it. Go ahead, Juan.
So in that navigation menu, like how you're doing it, right? Say you got a home, you got the second page, and you got a store page, you got the checkout page. How do you actually, I mean, I know we're probably not there yet, but from the coding aspect, are you able to actually make it functional where you could go on there and actually click on it to?
Yeah, right. Okay, so here's the secret sauce. We're learning about structure right now. We haven't learned about links yet, have we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the links are coming, man. Tonight yet. We're gonna get there. So Fasten your safety belt. All right, so I'm going to take this closing. I added the main tag now, so I'm going to take the closing one, and I'm going to determine that probably all the way down to here is where my main closes. So there's my copyright's going to be in the footer. And then I'm going to take all this content here, and you can see I'm like struggling to highlight it all. And then I'm going to hit my tab key to indent it. But notice what I'm doing is I'm creating the page sections. All the stuff that goes inside those page sections is indented, so I can see it really clearly. And then I have one last section to create, which is the footer. And then we'll put the closer for the footer here, right above the closing body tag. And then I'm going to indent its contents. Oops, not delete, indent. Okay, so I'm not sure why it's doing that, but let me try that one more time. Okay, just deleting. So I'm just going to, there we go. All right. So we have that indented and we have our structure. Now, I do want to point out again that what we used to do in the old days instead is we would do this. We'd go like div ID equals quotes footer, right? Something like that. And that was the old way to do it. The modern way is they just created the tags so we don't have to do the generics anymore. But the divs are still useful because as a generic container, you have complete stylistic control. And interestingly, the header, nav, main, footer, and we're soon going to learn article, section, and aside. Also, those are separate tags. All are basically generic containers that don't have styles attached to them already. But they do, and I want you to hear this clearly, they do have clear meaning, right? Doesn't it make sense if you have a header for your website to put it inside the header tag? Sure does, right? And then the other benefit is as we start to put stuff in containers, then I can stylistically control all of the stuff inside there with one fell swoop. I can put background images, change the fonts selectively, all that stuff, right? We haven't learned that yet, but we're getting there. So just to review really quick, so I know a lot of people are going to be watching the video and you guys might watch it again too. I created a header section. I put my H1, H2, H3 in there. I created a nav, soon to be populated with links, not quite yet because we haven't learned that yet. Then the main content for the page goes way, way down. That's all my paragraphs, lists, links, divs, all that stuff ends here. And then at the very bottom, I have a footer, but all of that stuff still sits inside the visible part of the page, the body part, right? Right. Let's do a Control S to save. And here's another takeaway. So these containers have no stylistic implications on them, right? So when I hit refresh, okay, it changed a little bit because I added this, but otherwise everything is exactly, it looks exactly the same. Where the magic will happen when you split stuff into containers is when you start to apply styles to it. And you'll see what I mean, because it becomes very powerful very, very quickly. Okay, so let's move on then. I think that covers that pretty well. So the other couple of elements, and I'm not necessarily going to add these elements right off the bat, but so they came up with header, footer, nav, and main. And then somebody's like, well, hey, you know, if I'm doing a blog or if I'm doing an article, wouldn't it be nice to have, like, you know, sometimes I have so much text, I want to put this in one section and I want to put this in another section. So they create the section tag. Same kind of thing. It's just a container. So if you have like let's say you have like 20 paragraphs on one topic and then 20 paragraphs on a different topic, you can put them inside separate section tags. If you have like a sidebar article, so I'm just kind of like thinking of that Boston Globe website here, like maybe this here on the side, we would call that an aside, It's not the main content. It's over there. It's over on the side, right? And so that's another container. Then we also have an article element. So like if I was writing like news content is really good for this, right? The actual article itself might all the stuff for it, maybe the words, the captions, the paragraphs, the images, the videos, all go inside the article tag because they're all related to each other. I'm not demonstrating these, but these are ones that are pretty commonly used. There's another one that they've added called a time element. So in other words, like if you were putting in, when this thing was created, you would put it inside a time tag and it would just really still just be a generic container. But what I don't know if you guys are noticing what's happening here, but all of these tags, header, nav, main, footer, aside, section, article, and time, all indicate what is inside them, right? And what that tells you is the tag has meaning, and in HTML we call that a semantic tag, meaning what does the tag mean? And I'll tell you why it's important, because when you're generating content and you want Google to scrape your page and list you in the search engine, if your content is good and it looks and it goes, hey, this is a header, this is important, this is an article, I understand what that is, it helps Google to boost you up the page rankings if you follow good design, because it's telling the search engine what's on your page. It makes it easier for searches to happen. You guys feel where I'm going with that, right? So even though it might visually have no impact, it has impact down the road when you're doing something more powerful. Also, when you put stuff inside of a container, it gives you increased stylistic control over the website, And so they're giving you an example here of like, clearly this is a header, that's a nav. I'm not sure what that is, right? But probably main content. And then maybe this whole, this is maybe a title here, but then maybe this whole thing is an article and that's a time and this is a section. I'm not really sure. But the point is the tags in the background give structure and meaning to what's on the page. And we call that the semantic web. All right, now comes the secret sauce. All right. What good is a web page that doesn't link to anything? I'm going to argue that's the magic of the web, is that capability to link from one thing to another. We do this through a special tag. It's basically a tag that's just an A tag, and we call that the anchor. Why they call it an anchor, I'm not really sure, but it's just the name that's kind of been around. So whenever I am trying to link from one page to another or one website to another, the anchor tag is what we use. So for example, take a look at the breakdown here, and I'll code it in just a second. But basically the format is we open the A tag, we put in a space, then we add an attribute, right? And then href stands for hyperlink reference, like where are we going is really what that means. And in this case, the link would just take us to another web page. And if it doesn't have, for example, in front of it, http:// like NFL.com, Green Bay Packers rule, something like that. Sorry, Bears fans. Then it's linking back to a page within this website. Right. So, you know what? We got to try this out. So let's start with something simple. Let's go into Visual Studio Code here. And what I'm going to do is, how about, let me see if I can find, since I'm like focusing on the Curse of Oak Island, I'm thinking they probably have like a web page. Okay, so they're on the History channel, and here's their page, right? So I'm going to click up here in the address bar, and then I'm going to right click and copy the address. And then I'm going to go back to my code, and then I'm just going to take this text right here, right? And you know what? How about let's do it a different way. All right, so I'm changing my mind here. I'm going to put in a paragraph, and then I'm going to put in my anchor tag, a space, my href, right? Gives me equals, double quotes. I'm going to paste in my link, and then I'm going to close the bracket. And notice how I closed the anchor tag there, right? And then in between, right here, I'm going to say the curse of Oak Island how about like history channel homepage, right? And I want you to notice a couple things here, and I'm gonna like go widescreen on this, right? This is all on one line, and I'm not gonna get it all to fit, but I'm trying, right? So it's all on one line. There it is, right? Right. So anchor tag, href, the link that we're going to, then we close the tag, and in between the two tags, this is the text that will appear on the screen. That's a link. I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to launch it. So I'm going to refresh. You can see the link there. Notice how it underlines, right? I'm going to hover over it. Notice how my pointer changes from an arrow to a finger. I can click it and check it out, folks. It's the magic of the web, right? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty slick. I mean, it's very, very simple, but pretty slick. So this would be a link to an external website. So that's one of the requirements of our exercise or assignment, right? So that's how you link to something outside. So you can, like, if you go to any website and you can pull it up and you can click on the address bar and you can right click and copy it, you can add it to your web page code. You're done. That's pretty simple. Pretty slick too, right? All right, but here's kind of what we're thinking here is like, if I have a navigation bar, what am I linking to in my navigation bar? Well, the answer is pretty simple, right? You're going to link to other pages in your site. Before I can link to those pages, I need to create them. So far, we've only worked with one page, right? All right. It's time to ramp that up a little bit, right? Let's do some real stuff here. Right? What good is a one-page website? Well, it can actually be pretty useful, honestly. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I opened up my little Explorer window here, and I already have a web page created that's got all the stuff in it that I need, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually right-click this. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to paste it. And notice it doesn't like it in the same spot, right? Because, all right, so here's what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to right click and rename it. And I'm going to call it, okay, what's a common page I might want to have here? About, a gallery, contact. All right. About sounds like a good one to me. So let's do an about page. So there it is. And now I'm going to pick that up and move it into that folder. Yes. Right. So now they're in the same folder. You see that? Now, if I come up here to my navigation, and I'm going to clear this stuff out now, because no longer will it be coming soon. Now it's going to be here, right? Now I'm going to create an anchor tag. I'm going to do my href, and now I'm going to link to that file. And all I have to say is the exact, since we're in the same folder, I just say about.html. Notice how it found it automatically. Oops. And then I can just press enter. It drops in. I close my bracket. And then what should the text say? How about, right? And there it is. So I'm going to save this back to the browser. And now comes the fun, right? I'm going to refresh. Oh, and what am I refreshing here? Oh, I'm okay. I didn't make any. Okay, so I put that about page nav thing on the about page, and I'm not even there yet. So that really should go, I apologize, on the index page, index. I'll paste it in there, save it. And now we refresh. There it is. Check it out. We're on the about page. Now, here's kind of a little bit of a problem. The about page is identical to the index page right now. So I'm going to go back to the about page, and I got to think about this a little bit. What parts of the page are going to change and what parts are not? I think most likely the header will stay the same, the nav will stay the same, and the footer will stay the same. But everything inside the div or the main, right? And watch what I do here also. I'm going to do my word wrap because it's not word wrapping. I'm going to come inside the main and I'm just going to blow away all the stuff inside the main, delete it. And then I'm just going to do a quick little, I don't know, H2 and say, this is the about page, and maybe, coming soon, something like that. All right. Saving it. Now, excuse me.
Bless you.
Let's refresh this index page. I didn't make any changes, but let's refresh it. I'm also going to go back to 100% zoom if I'm not already there, just so you can see, right, the change. So here we are at 100% zoom. I'm about to click the about link. There it goes. And now you can see I'm on the about page. One little problem I have is that I can't go back to the home page unless I hit the back button. So we got to fix that. So back on the index page, I'm going to start expanding my menu, right? I'm going to put in a space after the link, and then I'm going to create a new link. How about, what other pages might we have? Well, you know what? It'd be nice to go back to the home page. So if I did index.html, and then I just call this link home, right? And then I'm like, you know what? If that's really what that is, maybe that should go above this one, not below it, right? Adding a space at the end there. But let's think about this. What other pages might I add?
Well, like if you're a store, you'll have like a checkout page.
Yeah, something like that. You're right. I mean, but you could do something like a gallery. And then I want to show you guys a little trick here. I'm going to put in.
I got a question. I see like, is it going to be the same for gallery, like index.html, or is it?
No, you can only have one of those.
Okay.
Index is reserved for the home page.
Pages. Okay.
Yeah. Any other page, you can name it whatever you want. .html. Right. So you guys see like what I'm kind of doing here. Yeah. Now I'm getting a little snarky about it, but whatever. But I have this menu that I've built, and you know what? If I have this menu on one page, I should probably have that same menu on all the pages. So I'm going to add it here as well. Paste it. Make sure everything is saved. Now I'm going to go back to the browser. Is this index? We're going to refresh. So there's my menu slowly being built, right? And now I can go to my about page, and I can go back to my home page. Right. So what I'm doing here, having a simple second page and then being able to go back to the home page, that's one of the requirements of your assignment also. Right.
So the gallery won't work. Would the gallery work yet? It would just be
blank.
No,
well, I can answer that for you, Juan. I mean, right now we haven't created that page, have we?
So you would have to, you would have to, okay.
And then notice what I did here is I put in a pound sign, or the number or hash marker or whatever.
Yeah.
That one there, you can put in, if you don't know the link yet, you can put that in, and then on your web page it still behaves like a link. It just doesn't go anywhere. Monica, you've got a question.
Yes, I was just wondering, I know we have it separated with the header tag and the nav tag as two different sections, but I was wondering, can you put the nav tag in the header tag?
If you want, there's no rule. Yeah,
Okay, so
absolutely.
it's not
I
going to
do see
break
people do
anything.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. So some people, yeah, I mean, that's a really good point because some people consider the navigation as part of the header,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, you could totally do that. Um, I'm demonstrating it this way. I mean, if you want to do it the other way, that's fine.
No,
There's
I was just wondering if that was like a common practice, or is it something that's frowned upon in the industry? It's kind of where I was going with that.
yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I see it done both ways. And people like if people are putting the nav inside the header, they're doing it for a reason, you know. And I think a lot of times when you're working with content management systems, like WordPress, for example, often you do see the navigation embedded into the header. And then what you discover is that when you try to customize one or the other, they kind of like run into each other a little bit and can create conflicts. And so, I mean, ultimately, you do what is most appropriate for the project, right?
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way I would say it. Now, what I just did here, right? And you guys notice that um, I I put in the links. They're listed vertically, but on the web page, they kind of go across the screen. And ultimately, what I really want to build is a menu that's spread apart and looks really slick, and maybe has some cool hover effects on it and stuff like that. We're building towards that. We have to start simple with a framework before we start making it look all fancy. The one thing that would help me at least, right, and this is kind of my way of thinking, is I think it would be helpful if I had a few extra spaces in between each one of these links. And I don't know if you guys agree or not. I'll let you see the result after I kind of put this in, and maybe you agree, maybe you don't. All right, so I'm going to copy that. I'm just going to add it between each one of them. I don't need one in between the last one. The other thing that I'm also kind of tempted to do is make all of them bold. So I could put a bold tag around all of that. And I will probably remove this later, but I'm just doing it for now, just so you guys can see, right? I'm just going to indent that like that. And if you want, you could indent those one more click, right? Something like that. Now watch the difference as I go back to the browser and do a refresh. Assuming I'm looking at, all right, let's go to home. Let's refresh, and I'm not even looking at, oh, I did it to the about page. So let's see if we like it on the about page. See how it's a little more spread out, a little more bold, right? So normally I would style that with CSS, but I'm just doing a couple of primitive little hacks here to make it look better. I do think it looks better, so I'm going to kind of stick with it for now. So then I'm just going to copy all this again, and now I'm going to put it on my index page so that my pages are consistent. And then I'm going to save both, and then I'm going to test it again. Now I can go to home, about, very exciting for sure. And then we have these dead links that go nowhere. But the point is, we are now going from one page to another and going to an external website too. All right. Now, I think, we have a few slides left to go here. And I think we should take a break before we finish up these slides. We don't have much left to go. All right, so let's do a 5-minute break. I'm going to pause the recording, and then we'll come back and finish this up, and then we'll move ourselves into chapter 3 shortly. All right, so I think we covered that pretty good, demonstrated a few different aspects of it. But this is kind of a weird little effect too. Sometimes when you are directing people to an external website, you don't want them closing your window to get there. Right? Like, in other words, the way that I have that Oak Island link right now on that home page, right, when I click on it, it just stays in the same tab and replaces my content. But what if I wanted to open up in a separate tab so that my tab stays open in their browser, right? And I think that's often a very smart thing to do when going to a different website. Just depends, right? Kind of a judgment call. But I'm kind of looking here, like if I look up stuff about this show, they also have their like Wikipedia page. So maybe that would be a good one to test it with. So I'm going to just copy this link here. So I'm doing Control C to copy. And I'm going to go back to my editor and I'm going to add that link on the index page right below where I had the other one. So once again, I'm going to put that in a paragraph. And this is kind of something we haven't talked about yet. Like, why am I putting it in a paragraph? To basically give it structure and to, you know, help control the layout. Ultimately, could have been a div, could have been something else, but this is just what I chose. All right, then I'll do an href equals the double quotes. I'm not sure why it's not auto completing right now. That's kind of strange, but whatever. I can still manually add it. And then we'll close out our tag. Anchor tag is closed. And we'll say Wikipedia, I don't know, Wikipedia link. We'll just call it that for right now. And the point of, you know, what they're doing on that slide at this point is to open it in a new tab or window. Basically, all you have to do is add this little thing here that says target underscore blank. That will make that happen. So I'm just going to go ahead, go back here, and then right inside here, I'm going to say target equals underscore blank. I do want you to notice before I add the blank in there that there's 3 other options. Self is basically the default, right? That puts it back in the current tab. Parent is if it came from a different tab, we can pump it back to that one. Then there's top, which is also kind of a hard one to really explain, but it puts you back at the top level of the browser, which usually you're there anyhow. So I find that one kind of superfluous, but I'm going to go ahead with blank. I'm going to save this back over to the browser, quick refresh, and then see the link, and I'll watch it open up on a new tab. Interestingly, in all the modern browsers, the target underscore blank opens a new tab. In the old days, that would actually open up in a new browser window, right? And then I think, you know, all the browser people eventually figured it out. Hey, let's just do a new tab. That's better, right? Yeah, for sure. But there was a time, and it wasn't really all that long ago, when browsers did not have multiple tabs, you know. And I'm thinking like maybe it was 20 years ago when they introduced tabs. So that's kind of an interesting little aside, right? And that's why they, you know, they talk about new window instead. All right, let's move forward. That's how you open it up in a new window. Another possibility, and you know, the way that I've demonstrated this so far is they have these links. We put some words inside the anchor tags, right? These words, and that becomes the link, right? And you see that a lot on a web page, very, very normal. But what the book is indicating here, that you can also do what we call a block anchor. So it doesn't just have to be a little snippet of text that goes inside. You can put a whole lot more in there. And I'm going to give you a really neat little live website example of this. If you go to like the BBC News site, they've been doing this for a really long time. So normally, like I'm looking at this, you know, these articles here, and I think these are all like, you know, so anybody who watches this video like 5 years from now or something, and they're going to see the headlines from today. And I think that's always kind of weird. It's like stepping back in a time machine. But notice, like if I go here and I want to click on their link, it's underlined when I hover over it. And if I click on it, I would go to that link. But I want you to watch when I move my mouse around here. If I go over the image, it does the same thing. And if I go over the paragraph at the bottom, in fact, this whole little area here, I can't even see it. The whole thing is a link. I don't even have to be on the top of the words or the link to make the link work, because what they've done is what's shown in this slide, which is they're taking a bunch of different HTML stuff instead of just a couple of words and putting it inside those anchor tags, right? So here's the opening and the closing of the anchor tag. They got entire paragraphs and an H1 in there. And heck, if I knew how to put an image in, I could put the image in too, right? And it could all be the same link. It's kind of a clever little tactic. And you can see the effect of it on that BBC News website. So if you ever want to revisit that, I'm not going to demonstrate that, but easy enough to do if you're interested in doing it, right? That's something that you'll notice also as we move forward. Sometimes I'll talk about a tag and I'm like, I'm not going to demonstrate this one, right? You know, honestly, there's so many different tags and approaches that often it's your situation that dictates the need to use something. And just because something is out there, I'm not always necessarily saying that you have to use it, right? That's why, like, for example, that's not included as part of our assignment, right? Right. There's also this concept now of what we call absolute and relative links. Whenever I'm linking to something on the internet and I include the HTTP, that's considered an absolute link. That's absolutely a location on the internet, and we're going directly to it. It's on a server and we're getting to it. When we have a relative link, so in other words, even if I put my stuff on a web server, my index page is in the same folder as my about page. I don't need to put that HTTP and stuff because they're in the same folder, even out on the internet. So they're relative to each other. They're in the same folder. So it's a relative link. And so all I need is the right syntax here to direct the traffic to the page in the right spot within my own folder structure. If it's in the same folder, I just call out the file and I'm done, right? And that really should say index.html. It's kind of an interesting little sideline, but in the old days before Microsoft allowed for 4-digit extensions on HTML files, we had to cap it at HTML. So HTML is actually a valid approach also, but we really want to do HTML, if you're wondering. Here's one that you can find to be kind of helpful too, and this one's broken. How do you like that? A typo in the PowerPoint. But what if you want to create a link that makes your email or your client's email open up so they can send an email to you? Well, it's kind of interesting, right? So here's the syntax for that. You just do an anchor tag, and inside the quotes, you just do mail to, no spaces, a colon, no spaces, and then the email address. Let's try that. Let's see if we can add that to our page. And I think maybe a good spot for that might be down in the footer. So like I have my copyright, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll just do it right at the end of it. Maybe I'll say like, for a web design quote, email me, right? And then I would put in my link, and I would say href equals double quotes, and then inside there I would say mail to colon, and I'll just put in my regular email address here, so you can reach me there. Then I would close that, and then I would, this is my suggestion, is they actually list your email address here. Some people say, well, then people can see what your email address is. And I'm like, well, if they click it, they'll see it anyhow, right? But the truth is, either one of those can be scraped by a search engine or a crawling tool or whatever, or even just computer code. So I don't see any harm in doing that. So I'm going to, put in this link here. Let's take a look at it in the browser once again. Let's do a refresh. And then right down here, you can see the link. It's tiny, right? Because it's inside the small tag. But watch what happens when I click it. It's going to launch, at least on my machine, I don't have a default email client declared anymore. I used to use Outlook in the old days, and Thunderbird Mail and all that kind of goofy stuff when we had to. The modern days, I do all my email in the browser, and this is probably what most people do. So this is really a good case scenario. If I were to actually, force it to go to the mail app, so I do have it set up, right? I have an account that feeds in there, I think. It will create a new email message, from whatever account I'm using, and send it to that address that's intended. The user just needs to type in the subject and the message, right? That's how this is set up, and they have to hit send. unfortunately, and I say this, you know, from a practical standpoint, when you're doing this technique, most people don't configure their email that way anymore. So some people are, oh, that's great. I don't use this. I guess forget it. Right. And so that's why it's also a good idea to provide it in plain text, because then they could just right click and copy that email address and then send that using whatever approach that they want to use to send it. It seems to me that you guys are all locked up, so I'm concerned that my connection has dropped. So I'm going to see if I can pause for a moment.
No, I'm still here.
Yep. I think I'm locked up. I'm trying to pause the recording. I'm not really sure what's going on. So this will make for really awkward little video spots. If you guys just hang tight here, while I see if I can fix this issue.
Hey, when the shoe fits. He's gonna look back at this and be so confused.
All right, folks, I'm not sure if you guys can hear me, but I'm going to have to reboot, I think, because I'm completely locked up here.
I hear
I'm not
you.
sure what that,
Loud and
yeah,
clear.
I'm not sure what it's going to do to the recording, but it should be interesting. Right now, I mean, sounds like Zoom is transmitting audio, but I cannot do anything else on my screen. I'm not sure what happened there. So maybe that mail program messed me up. All right, I'll see you in about 2 minutes.
Perfect.
Bye.